Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the shadowy, spice-scented streets of ancient Carthage. The sun is just setting, staining the Mediterranean sky with honeyed golds and burnt rose. Seabirds drift lazily above the harbour. And you, yes, you are shuffling your way through the market gates, sandals brushing the dusty stone as the crowds begin to thin. The scent of crushed olives mingles with the tang of fermented fish paste, and beneath it all is something sweeter, a trail of fruity sharpness that tugs at your nostrils like a childhood memory. You round the corner past a stall draped in dyed linen, and there they are, pomegranates, glossy, swollen, and arranged like a miniature army of rubies. The vendor gives you a nod, but doesn't say a word, perhaps because even he knows there's something about these fruits that goes beyond their taste. They shimmer like they've been polished by tiny gods, or possibly just a really picky merchant with a damp cloth. You reach out to touch one, and let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive long here. You're a modern soul in a place where curses are passed down in fruit baskets, and everyone seems just a little too superstitious for comfort. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're already drifting off, leave a comment with your location and local time. It's always amazing to see where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You continue into the marketplace, the pomegranate now heavy in your hand. Its surface is unblemished, smooth, save for a single pinprick scar near the stem. You think nothing of it, until the old woman at the next stall gasps softly, crossing herself with fingers stained from saffron threads. "Too perfect," she whispers in Punic. Or at least, that's what you think she said. She could just be commenting on the weather, but the way she backs away makes you second-guess picking that particular fruit. You place it gently back down on the pile, suddenly to your left, a group of children is gathered around a puppet show, where a felt lion is roaring at a pomegranate perched on a throne. No one laughs. The performance is oddly somber. You glance at the carved masks above the stage. Are those tears or just stylized paint drips? By now the street lamps are flickering to life. Little oil-fueled bowls nestled in alcoves. You watch a flame catch, casting soft shadows against the stone buildings. A stray cat rubs against your leg, and then disappears behind a stall loaded with dates. Carthage at night is still alive, but in a more secretive, murmuring way. You hear whispers in courtyards, a woman singing to herself behind a lattice, the sudden flutter of pigeons disturbed from their roost. It's tempting to think of Carthage as Rome's less glamorous sibling, but here, under the stars, it's something else. Older, stranger, it has a rhythm all its own, pulsing softly like a sleeping animal. One that dreams in languages we've mostly forgotten. You stop at a vendor selling pressed oil and candles and ask, gently, about the fruit you merely bought. He shrugs, wipes his hands on a cloth, and leans in close. They say he breathes. Some are born too symmetrical. Nature doesn't make perfect. The gods do. And with that cryptic little nugget, he presses a candle into your palm and waves you off without payment. You wander deeper now, into the lesser-lit lanes. There's a small fountain where someone's tossed pomegranate seeds into the water. They float like little ruby eyes. You kneel, fingers trailing through the cool stream, and imagine someone making a wish here, not for wealth or love, but for answers. A historian once described Carthage as a city too clever by half, filled with tricks and trades, ships and scrolls, gods and gamblers. It was a city of contradictions, fiercely organized, yet wildly superstitious. Its people traded with Greeks and Egyptians, but held on to older, quieter rites when no one was watching. Some say the pomegranate came to Carthage from Persia. Others insist it was native to the land, springing up from the blood of a titan in one of the pre-Roman creation myths. Historians still argue whether it was a trade crop or a religious symbol first, but you're here now and you can almost believe it was both from the beginning. You pass a small altar tucked between two homes. It's little more than a hollowed stone with melted wax and a few scattered seeds inside. Someone scrawled a protective symbol around it in wine. Above, the windows are dark, Someone somewhere thinks this fruit can listen. One final stop before heading back, a corner baker, still selling late-night flatbreads, wrapped around bits of goat cheese and pomegranate syrup. He gives you one for half price, with a wink and a whispered warning, don't eat it under a full moon. You chew slowly, letting the sweetness and salt mingle on your tongue. The juice stains your fingers and you lick them clean. And now, full, warm and just a little bit spooked, you wander back toward your inn beneath a sky that's gone full indigo. In your room on a low wooden table, a single pomegranate waits in a ceramic bowl. It wasn't there when you left. You stare at it for a moment, then blow out the candle. The candle smoke curls upward like a question mark. As darkness settles over your small tiled room, you lie back on the cot, but your eyes can't help drifting toward the ceramic bowl on the table. The pomegranate sits there silent, crimson skin catching the faint moonlight that seeps through the lattice window. It's absurd, of course. A piece of fruit can't possibly follow you. And yet, didn't you choose one earlier, then put it back? Maybe the vendor changed their mind and had it delivered. Or maybe someone's idea of a welcome gift just happens to align with your increasingly strange evening. You roll onto your side and close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come. Instead, your thoughts circle back to that pomegranate. Its sheen, its symmetry, the sheer presence of it. You remember what the candle seller said, nature doesn't make perfect, the gods do. Pomegranates in Carthaginian culture weren't just snacks, they were symbol of fertility, prosperity, eternal life. Sure, everyone from the Greeks to the Egyptians had some idea of what the fruit meant, but here in Carthage, it took on extra dimensions. Depending on who you asked, it was a womb, a weapon, a mirror, a mess. The philosopher Mago, whose massive agricultural treatises are mostly lost to time, devoted an entire chapter to the proper placement of pomegranate trees to avoid jealous entanglements with neighboring figs. What that meant exactly is lost in translation, but scholars have theories. As usual, they still argue whether Mago was describing literal horticulture or veiled social commentary. You sit up, curiosity outweighing sleep. You approach the fruit, run your thumb along its skin. It's lovely. You hate to admit it, but it really is. Almost too lovely. The Carthaginians believed that such perfection didn't come free. Somewhere there had to be a flaw, a single hidden bruise, a worm burrowed so deep it might never surface until it did. That's what made the fruit dangerous. You recall an old Punic folktale you overheard earlier at the harbor. Two sailors whispering over cups of date wine. A wealthy merchant had once refused to sell a pomegranate from his grove, claiming it was a gift of the divine. When his son opened it anyway, it was full of The next day the merchant's entire vineyard withered to dust. Or maybe it was mildew. Either way, moral delivered. Some Carthaginians feared the fruit not because of what it was, but because of what it might contain. A number, a message, a curse. There's a kind of quiet dread reserved only for things that are almost too good. That new vase with no fingerprints. That stranger who knows your name. The pomegranate that never bruises, even when dropped. You sit by the table and lean close. The seeds inside a typical pomegranate, today, number anywhere from 200. But in ancient Carthage, there was one number they whispered about, 6 ones and 13. The same number of commandments in certain Hebrew traditions. The same count as the supposed perfect fruit. How could nature be that consistent? And if it wasn't nature, what was? Some priests believed that fruits with exactly 6 ones and 13 seeds had been touched. Not always maliciously, sometimes it was a blessing, a sign of purity, but just as often, it was seen as an intrusion, a god reminding you they're still watching, that even your harvest isn't fully yours. Historians still argue whether this belief came from local mystics, foreign traders, or a general tendency of bored priests to assign divine meaning to produce. But records survive, faint carvings on temple stone, half-erased clay tablets, hinting at seed-counting rituals. These weren't casual pastimes, they were rites, performed with reverence, patience, and very sharp knives. Back in your room, you glance at the pomegranate again. Your candle has long since gone out, but the fruit is still visible, just barely, its shape outlined in silver-blue moonlight. You should sleep, you know that, but your fingers itch. You reach into your bag and pull out your pocket knife. Carthaginian etiquette likely frowns upon stabbing fruit in the dead of night, but your curiosity is stronger than your manners. You press the blade into the skin, a soft crack, and the rind splits. Not a gush, just a gentle part, a neat line that opens to reveal the first few glistening seeds. You whisper an apology to no one in particular. The seeds are perfect, no blemish, no rot. They're packed tightly, like little secrets, and so you begin to count. 1, 2, 5, 13. The numbers lull you, the rhythm as soothing as a lullaby. It's not long before your chin droops, the blade slides harmlessly from your hand, and your eyes close mid-count. The pomegranate sits open beside you, half-counted, half-eaten, wholly mysterious. In another part of the city, a priest wakes from sleep, unsettled for reasons he can't name. Outside, the wind shifts. A cat cries once and then falls silent. But you sleep on, seeds scattered on the floor like soft punctuation marks in a story just beginning. By morning, the pomegranate seeds have dried, slightly sticky little rubies clinging to the wooden floor like a mosaic halfway through assembly. You wake slowly, with the soft haze of dreams still lingering around your temples. For a moment you forget where you are, then your eyes catch the half-open fruit. And it all comes rushing back. The night, the counting, the way the blade had slid into the skin like it was always meant to. You stretch, limbs heavy with sleep, and shuffle to the wash basin. Splashing your face with cool water does little to shake off the strange stillness clinging to the air. Carthage is already alive outside, calls from vendors, the clatter of cartwheels, the occasional goat expressing a strongly held opinion, but your room feels apart from it all, like a page tucked too far into a book. The pomegranate sits there, patient. You examine the seeds again. You'd counted at least 50 before drifting off. Still so many left. The number 6113 echoes in your mind. And not just as a scholarly footnote, the Carthaginians didn't just count seeds. They read them, like entrails, or tea leaves, or suspicious neighbor behavior. You remember hearing about a merchant, back near the harbor, who read pomegranate seeds professionally, not quite a priest, not quite a fraud, somewhere in between. He wore an eye patch even though both eyes seemed fine, and his stall was always just off-center from the market's main road. Naturally, you're already on your way. As you navigate the warm sandstone alleys, the scent of last night's bread mingles with sea brine. Children dart past, trailing laughter and hints of mint on their fingers. You pass a woman balancing an absurdly tall stack of rugs on her head, as casually as one balances gossip. And there he is. His name apparently is Balhemia, or at least that's what the painted sign above his stall claims, in both Punic and a shaky Greek translation. He's draped in layered linen, most of it red, and he's arranging a row of pomegranates, with the intensity of someone laying chess traps. He looks up and gives you a smile that feels, well rehearsed. You have a seed count, he says, even before you open your mouth. You nod slowly. He gestures to a stool padded with goat wool, and invites you to sit. Then from beneath the table, he draws a small curved blade and a thin brush. Tools of the trade. You didn't finish, he murmurs. That's dangerous. You raise an eyebrow, but he's not joking. Uncounted seeds, he explains, are like unspoken wishes. They hang around. They get impatient. You're about to laugh when he adds, last week a man dreamt of fire for 3 nights. All because he stopped counting at. Balhemia takes the half-open pomegranate from your satchel. He inspects it like a jeweler would a suspicious gem, holding it to the light, tilting it gently. Then he taps the seeds with his brush, murmuring numbers under his breath. Historians still argue whether these pomegranate diviners were real spiritual leaders, or just very committed con men. There's no firm archaeological proof of their rituals, but there are references, side notes in temple logs, scribbles in the margins of agricultural treatises. One Roman historian referred to them as fruit whisperers, and claimed they were banned during certain public festivals for being too distracting. Balhemia pauses, frowns. This seed, he says, pointing, is shadow-touched. You blink. It looks like all the others. Glossy crimson, slightly translucent. But he taps it with his brush again, and the seed wobbles more than it should. Bad omen, you ask, voice lower now. He shrugs. Could mean anything. Could mean nothing, but you shouldn't eat it. He plucks it out and drops it into a small dish filled with what looks suspiciously like wine and rosemary. It sinks immediately. You're lucky, he says. Most shadow-touched seeds go unnoticed. They slip inside. They make things complicated. You're tempted to press him further, but part of you doesn't want to know what complicated entails. Instead, you watch as he finishes counting the rest. Fingers moving quickly, lips forming silent syllables. 612, he says at last. You frown. Wait, so with the cursed one? He nods. Exactly 613. You sit back, the weight of that number landing softly but firmly in your gut. Balhemia leans in closer. You're marked now, not in a bad way, not necessarily, but things will notice you a little more. Not exactly the reassurance you were hoping for. He gives you a small pouch of dried pomegranate rind and instructions to sleep with it under your pillow. For clarity, he says, and to keep nosy dreams away. You thank him, unsure of whether you've been scammed or blessed. Maybe both. On your way back through the market, you notice more pomegranates than you remember. Carved into lintels, pressed into mosaic tiles, painted onto temple walls. Always there, always watching. And maybe, just maybe, you feel a bit more watched. You make your way back through the weaving alleys of Carthage. The small pouch of dried rind clutched lightly in your palm. You try not to feel silly about it. You're not superstitious. Not real. But something about Balhemia's tone lingers in your mind like the last echo of a dream. Unplaceable but persistent. As you approach a wider avenue lined with sandstone columns, you hear bells tolling faintly in the distance, a low resonant chime that signals the beginning of temple hour. Priests begin to emerge from shaded doorways, robed in loose white and saffron cloth, heads bowed slightly as they shuffle toward the high temple of Tanit. You follow them slowly, pretending to just be a curious outsider with a fondness for architecture. But you're watching the pomegranate. They're everywhere in the temple district, woven into banners, cast in bronze atop ceremonial staffs, engraved above doorways where only initiates may enter. At the great steps of the temple, one of the younger priests stumbles. His fruit basket, yes, of course it's fruit, tips forward and several round pomegranates spill out across the stone. For a moment time slows. Every priest within reach rushes forward, not to help him up, but to inspect the fruit. They don't want it bruised. You learn later that any blemished pomegranate, once offered to the goddess, had to be buried immediately, not discarded, buried, preferably on temple ground, preferably before sundown. Why? Because bruised fruit could be misread as divine displeasure. And when the gods disapproved, they rarely sent memos. They sent plagues, or droughts, or mysteriously lost trade shipments. You watch as the young priest is gently led away, one hand trembling. Another acolyte begins to bless each remaining fruit with murmured chants and a dab of perfumed oil. The pomegranate, it seems, is not just a symbol here, it's a language. Unlike any language, it can be misused. You wander into the side gardens, where the scent of incense drifts lazily through the citrus trees. There's a woman there, older, robed in indigo, carefully arranging more pomegranates around a small altar dedicated to Balhemen, god of fertility and the sun. She sees you watching and beckons you over. These fruits, she says softly, speak. You just have to know what to listen for. You ask her what they say. She smiles. Depends on the shape, the sheen. Sometimes the seeds arrange themselves in a spiral. That means prosperity. But if they form a crescent, she shakes her head. Historians still argue whether these readings were literal belief, or just ceremonial pageantry. Roman sources mock Carthaginians endlessly for treating produce like prophets. but Roman sources also thought geese were adequate night guards. So let's not rush to judgment. The woman gently places a single enormous fruit on the altar. It gleams as though buffed by moonlight, its skin without a single mark. That one, she says, almost reverently, is a sign. You don't ask of what. You don't want to know. She notices the pouch of rind peeking from your satchel and nods approvingly. Balhemia sees more than he admits, she says. Keep that close. You sit quietly with her for a while, watching the bees flit between blossoms and the filtered light ripple through the trees. It's the kind of moment that feels too quiet for modern life, like even the wind is holding its breath. Eventually she begins to hum, a low rhythmic sound, and you close your eyes. When you open them, you're alone again. The altar is still there. The fruit is still perfect. You rise and wander toward the far edge of the garden, where a smaller shrine, more weathered, bears carvings of pomegranates split open, seeds tumbling like stars. An old man sweeping the stone path pauses to comment. They used to think every seed held a soul, he says, chuckling. Imagine that, a whole fruit, crowded with tiny spirits jostling around in there like market day. You laugh politely, but there's something unsettling about the image. Dozens of invisible voices, trapped under that thin red skin. Wait, you ask what happened to the souls once the fruit was eaten. He winks. Depends who eats it. The sweep of his broom resumes, as if that explains everything. Later, as you step back into the sunlit street, you notice a child drawing on the dusty ground with a stick. Her picture shows a woman holding a pomegranate the size of her head. Behind her, small figures, perhaps spirits, reach up with tiny hands. Who is that? You ask gently. She looks up. Tanit, she says. She makes the pomegranates smile. That night you can't help staring at your bowl again. The new fruit you bought at the temple market gleams like the moon dipped into wax. You don't dare cut it open, not yet. Instead you tuck the rind pouch under your pillow, lie back and wait for the dream. They come, soft, strange and sweet. You wake before dawn, stirred not by sound but by the distinct sense of being watched. Not unpleasantly. More like that feeling when a cat sits across the room and stares at you with the casual authority of a being who clearly knows something you don't. The pomegranate still sits in its bowl unmoved, unbitten, but now, noticeably, surrounded by 3 faint pips of red, where seeds must have spilled. You didn't open it. You're certain. The rind is intact. You lean in closer, trying not to breathe too loudly, as if that might startle it. The fruit doesn't budge, but the air around it feels warmer. Back in ancient Carthage, dawn meant rituals, the kind you performed sleepily, with stiff fingers and sandal straps tangled from last night's haste. Even the high priests weren't exempt. Every temple had its morning observances, libations to the gods, cleansing of the altars, and yes, even fruit inspection. You slip out into the morning air, shadows still long and gold across the market square. Most vendors are only just arriving. The fishmongers have the haunted look of men who've wrestled with squids before coffee. You wind your way through the stalls until you find the edge of the plaza, the one where fortune tellers, musicians and self-appointed philosophers gather like pigeons with flair. Today, one man is making a show of slicing open pomegranates with a curved blade, letting the seeds spill into a bronze bowl. Behind him, a board of symbols and runes awaits interpretation. People line up with coins and questions. You watch as a young woman steps forward, whispers something, and the man, his beard immaculate, his jewelry heavy enough to anchor a boat, plucks a seed and presses it to his forehead. Your cousin is lying about the goat, he says solemnly. The woman gasps. Pomegranate abjury was real business here. Less prestigious than temple reading, sure, but far more accessible to the average citizen, and lucrative, if you had the flair for it. These fruit readers didn't just guess, many of them trained for years in fruit behavior, the study of how seeds clustered, how rinds cracked, how juice flowed. Historians still argue whether this was considered science, sorcery, or some deeply committed form of improv theatre. You're about to move on when the reader catches your eye. You have the mark, he says, pointing. Of course you do. You sit. He produces a fruit from beneath the table, duller than yours with a slight scar on one side. I'll show you how to read the spiral, he says, slicing slowly. The seeds inside glisten. He taps a few gently with a long, delicate pin, drawing out a faint pattern. If they curve toward the north, expect clarity. If they scatter too far, expect loss. You nod as if this makes sense. And if they cluster around a gap, you ask. He pauses. That's a hole in the future. A void. Charming. As the crowd shifts, an elderly woman joins the stall beside his, unrolling a rug and setting up a display of pomegranate-shaped amulets. She meets your gaze and chuckles. They say the fruit sings if you sleep beside it, she said. Softly, like a lullaby only ghosts remember. You buy one of her charms, a little clay token shaped like a halved fruit, and tuck it in your satchel. As you wonder, a thought occurs to you. If this much ceremony surrounds the fruit before it's eaten, what about after? Turns out Carthaginians had rituals even for the peels. After a particularly rare or perfect fruit had been consumed, always ceremonially, and often by priests. The rind was dried, bound, and burned on specific feast days. The smoke, it was believed, carried either blessings or burdens into the air depending on the manner of its burning. Rinds burned too quickly, a warning. Too slowly, a sign of resistance from the gods. Then it could be mixed into incense and used for prayers of safe travel or fertility. One preserved tablet refers to a woman who burned pomegranate peels before her wedding to invite the child spirits early. Charming, slightly unsettling. You return to your room later, thoughts thick with pulp and poetry. The air is still warm, touched by the afternoon haze, and the shadows cast by your lattice window stretch like lazy cats across the floor. You sit by the bowl again. This time you speak aloud. So, what are you? The pomegranate, predictably, doesn't answer, but you swear it glows a little brighter in the light. You open your travel journal and begin to sketch it, tracing its lines with care, noting its minor imperfections there, a tiny speck, there, a crease. You're hunting for the meaning now. A spiral, a crack, a sacred gap, anything. You pause to count the seeds from last night, still resting in the folded cloth where you stashed them. 1, 2, 24. They end at 61. You frown. You're sure you had more. From the corner of the room, a faint thump. The wind, probably, but you turn slowly anyway. Just shadows. Still you count again. Still 61. You don't sleep that night, not from fear but from attention. You're listening now closely for a lullaby no one remembers teaching. And maybe, just maybe, you hear it. Sleep, when it finally comes, arrives in slow, syrupy waves. You drift in and out, hovering in that space where dreams feel more like overheard conversations in a language you almost understand. You awaken to find that dawn has long since passed, and Carthage is already bustling, sun bright and buzzing with commerce. The pomegranate in the bowl remains, of course, unchanged. But you've changed, or maybe just the way you look at things has. You no longer see fruit, you see omen, symbol, invitation. Today you decide to visit the women's quarter. In ancient Carthage, domestic spaces weren't just for rest, they were theaters of ritual, politics, and layered intention. Behind the carved doors of merchant homes and courtyard dwellings, women preserved stories older than the stones that lined the streets. You're led there by a neighbor's granddaughter, a sharp-eyed girl named Amika, who chats easily and moves like a breeze. Her mother makes pomegranate wine, she tells you, but her grandmother keeps the fruit whole. She says once it's opened, things start happening. Amika adds with a knowing shrug. You duck into the shaded entry of their home, where the courtyard garden blooms with herbs, ivy, and yes, pomegranate trees. Their branches stretch up as if grasping for something beyond the sun. In the center, under a linen canopy, an old woman sits cross-legged, gently rubbing oil into a fruit skin with the reverence of a jeweler polishing a sacred relic. She doesn't look up as you approach. She's preparing for the rite, Amika whispered. You take a seat, slow and respectful, beside the mat. The old woman finally meets your gaze. You brought seed shadow, she says flatly. You pause, unsure whether it's a statement or a question. She extends her hand, and without thinking you pass her the charm from your satchel, the clay fruit shape from the market. She nods approvingly and tucks it beside a small bronze lamp shaped like a sleeping lion. "This," she says, holding up the polished pomegranate, "isn't for eating, it's for drawing them in." You ask who she means, and she simply points upward, then downward, then inward. The ritual begins with humming, deep, low vibrations that seem to resonate from her very chest. Amika pours pomegranate wine into a shallow bowl, then sprinkles dried petals atop the surface. The scent is intoxicating, earthy, floral, and slightly bitter. You watch as the old woman anoints the fruit, speaking words in a language not even your tour guides mention. Then she gently presses it to her chest and murmurs a request. To what? For what? She doesn't say. This rite, you learn, is a fertility offering, but not just in the physical sense. It's about creativity, dreams, continuity, planting seeds, yes, but also awakening ones already there. The fruit represents possibility and fear, because both are wrapped in mystery. Historians still argue whether Carthaginian fertility rites were fully religious or partly medicinal. Some evidence points to the use of pomegranate seeds and rind in early contraceptive brews combined with crocodile dung, if you can believe it. Others point to priestess carvings and moon calendars etched with fruit symbols. And then there are the stories passed down that women placed pomegranates beneath their beds to dream of unborn children or gain answers to private questions. When the rite ends, the old woman finally speaks. "You dream loud," she says. You smile politely, unsure how to reply. She reaches behind her and pulls out a carved wooden box, opening it with the slowness of someone revealing something precious. Inside, more pomegranate charms, some whole, some split, some shaped like small figures with fruit for heads. She offers you one. It's worn smooth, clearly held by many hands. "For what you're carrying," she says. You don't ask what she means, you just accept. As you walk back through the quarter, you notice how many homes bear the mark of the fruit painted on doors, stitched into curtains, etched into small charms that jingle softly in the wind. At one home, a group of women sit shelling seeds into a bowl while gossiping about a neighbor's failed harvest. One mentions a fruit that bled too early, another swears she saw a pomegranate with a face in the rind. Laughter follows, but with an air, as if they're not sure whether to believe themselves. You sit with them briefly, shell a few seeds, and ask if they've ever feared the fruit. "Oh, all the time," one woman laughs. "But we fear our mothers-in-law more, so we keep planting." The woman next to her leans. "Once I opened one that had only 3 seeds, just 3. I buried it, didn't tell anyone." You glance at her hands, stained pink, steady. And another adds, "They say if you open a perfect fruit at the wrong hour, the dreams you have that night won't be yours." A beat of silence, then more laughter. Later, in your room, you unwrap the new charm and place it beside your pillow. You dream again, not of fruit this time, but of roots, twisting through sand, cracking stone, threading their way toward something soft and hidden. And in the distance, the hum of a woman's voice, low and warm, counting seeds.
When you wake, your mouth tastes faintly of pomegranate, though you haven't eaten any. Not since that first night. The dream still clings to your skin, like steam in a bathhouse. You stretch slowly, mind hazy, and sit up to find a shallow indentation on your windowsill, as though something round and heavy had rested there overnight. Just the wind, probably, or a cat, or some local god on its morning rounds. You dress and slip out onto the sun-drenched streets once more. Today, you're headed toward one of the more curious corners of Carthaginian culture, its court system. Not because you've gotten into trouble yet, but because you've heard a rumor that makes this whole pomegranate situation feel even weirder. Apparently, people used to swear oaths over them. Yes, instead of pressing your hand on a tablet or swearing by a deity, you'd hold a pomegranate, whole or split, depending on the severity of the vow. You arrive at the Hall of Voices, an unimposing stone structure with thick columns and a wide central forum where cases are still debated. Of course, you can't understand everything being said, but it's easy enough to pick up the mood. One man is shouting about stolen goats, another quietly insists he didn't poison his neighbor's well.
It was just sour from the start, but it's what's sitting on the magistrate's table that catches your eye. A bowl of pomegranates. Not just for snacking. A scribe standing nearby, bored but watchful, sees your interest and offers an explanation in halting Greek. Swear over the fruit, he says, because it binds. If you lie, the seeds scatter your soul. He says this with the ease of someone quoting street wisdom, but also with just enough reverence to suggest he's not entirely kidding. You sit on one of the stone benches near the rear of the forum and watch a case unfold. A woman accuses her neighbor of breaking a boundary wall and stealing her olive oil jugs. The neighbor insists the wind did it. The judge listens patiently, then instructs both to place their hands on a fruit and repeat their testimony. The woman presses her palm against the uncut pomegranate, like it's a sleeping animal. I swear, she says, let the seeds know I speak true. The neighbor hesitates before touching his, then repeats the vow. No immediate lightning bolt, no sudden gust of divine wind, but you notice the room goes quieter somehow. As if everyone is holding their breath, not for drama but for acknowledgement, like the fruit will decide whose soul holds weight. Historians still argue whether this practice was legally binding or more symbolic. Some believe it was rooted in the idea of wholeness, that the uncut pomegranate represented truth, and to swear falsely upon it was to invite fragmentation. Others insist it was simply a dramatic flair borrowed from neighboring cultures to add gravity to otherwise mundane complaints. But there are records, stone tablets etched with rulings where pomegranate oaths were invoked. In one case, a man accused of theft confessed only after the fruit was placed in his lap. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the seeds knew. After the session ends, you make your way to the side courtyard where lower officials handle disputes of less public interest. Mostly trade disagreements, and today, something about a donkey that refuses to move unless sung to. You strike up a conversation with a younger official who admits the pomegranate oath system isn't as common now. Only for stubborn cases, he shrugs. Or when people are too afraid to lie, he tells you that long ago some believed you had to open the fruit after the oath. If it bled unevenly, juice too dark, too thick, or seeping in odd patterns, it meant deceit. One legendary case involved a fruit that split before anyone touched it. The defendant was acquitted immediately. The gods had already passed judgment, the record said. The official laughed. Imagine trusting a fruit more than your neighbor. You laugh with him, but you get it. The fruit doesn't scheme, doesn't whisper in alleys. It simply is. Later you stop by a local vendor and ask casually if he sells any oath-grade pomegranate. He looks you over, then reaches beneath the counter for one wrapped in cloth. It's darker than the others, heavier too. He says nothing, just raises his eyebrows. You buy it, obviously. Back in your room you place the fruit beside the others. It looks the same, but you know it isn't. You run your fingers across its cool skin, and before you can second-guess yourself you speak aloud. I swear I won't open this. Not unless I need to. The room feels still. Then a soft breeze rattles the lattice window. Nothing dramatic, just a whisper of air. You breathe out slow. Maybe it's just a fruit. Or maybe it just heard you. By now you've stopped pretending that Carthage is just a nice place to visit. You're entangled. Pomegranates have woven their way into your routine. Your thoughts, your dreams. This city, its stone and salt, its heat and honey, has you by the senses and it's not letting go. Today you're headed to the docks. Because here's the thing. Carthaginians weren't just farmers or priests. They were master traders, seafarers, and shipbuilders. Their harbour was the envy of the Mediterranean. A double dock system so advanced that even Rome raised an eyebrow. And along with cedar and silver, olive oil and linen, they shipped pomegranates, by the basketful, by the bar. The walk to the port is a lesson in textures. Sandy plaster walls, sticky fig drips on stone, bursts of laughter echoing through narrow alleys. By the time you reach the quay, the sea stretches out before you like a wrinkled silk sheet, dotted with. You duck into a shaded warehouse, where crates are being loaded onto a long, low merchant ship. The crates are labeled with glyphs you've come to recognize. A stylized fruit split open, seeds like stars. A deckhand, wiry and sun-baked, waves you off at first, but when you flash your merchant token, courtesy of your innkeeper and a healthy bribe, he relents. These ones go to Syracuse, he explains, tapping the crates. They like the sweeter kind, less sacred, more juice. You ask if he's ever had problems shipping. He squints at you like you've asked if water is wet. Fruit goes bad, that happens. But once, he says, voice lowering, we had a crate of perfect ones. I mean perfect. Every fruit same size, same color, no bruises, not a one. You nod for him to continue. They never made it. Ship was found drifting near Malta. Crew gone. No signs of a struggle. Crates untouched. But when they opened the pomegranates, he trails off. You lean in. Sand. Nothing but sand inside. Historians still argue whether Carthaginian sailors truly believed in cursed cargo. Some claim the stories were meant to deter thieves. Others think the tales were just ways to pass long, sleepless nights at sea. But there are records of entire shipments rerouted or dumped overboard because the fruit sang. Yes, sang. You press the deckhand on this. He laughs nervous, not like a person, he clarifies, more like humming, real low, like wind through a shell. We tossed those crates into the water and didn't look back. He pats a nearby crate. These are fine though, mostly. Hopefully. You thank him and move on down to the beach where smaller vessels bob near the shore. A boy is cleaning a boat carved with what else? Pomegranate vines. His grandfather joins you with a limping gait and a face like driftwood. They used to say the fruit carried the voices of drowned sailors, he murmurs. Crack one open near the sea and you might hear their last words. You ask if he believes that. He shrugs. Belief is for priests. I've seen a pomegranate float upstream. That evening you return to your room with a souvenir. An old sun-bleached fruit the boy gave you from the boat's prow. It's hollow inside, rattleless. Still, it holds a strange weight. You place it on your windowsill beside the oath fruit. They sit there like two sentinels. One full of promises, one full of ghosts. Before sleep you unroll an old scroll you bought in the market. It's a sailor's log scrawled in fading ink. Amidst trade tallies and course corrections is a single line circled in red. Do not sail with more than 13. 13 and they watch. What did that mean? 13 pomegranates. 13 crates. 13 perfect fruits. You look around your room and count. 6 in the bowl. 1 oath fruit. 1 dried one. A few charms maybe. You stop counting. That night your dreams are of water. Salt and foam and rhythmic waves. And somewhere beneath it all a faint humming. A lullaby in a language that tastes like pomegranate.
The next morning finds you strolling a quieter path through Carthage, one not marked on tourist maps if those had even existed. This part of the city hugs the outer edge of the temple district, where homes are older, vines are wilder, and the walls tell stories quite literally. You've heard whispers about this place from merchants, from Bal Hemir, even from the little girl who'd pointed to Timit, making pomegranates smile. This, they said, is where the murals grow, not a painted grow. A strange turn of phrase, but you're used to that by now. You turn down a lane so narrow you could brush both walls if you stretched your arms. Sunlight slants through the canopy of overgrown fig and olive, dappling the stone with warm blotches. Then, around the corner you see them. Murals, dozens of them, frescoed onto the outer walls of homes, temples and seemingly forgotten altars. And everywhere, pomegranates. Not just tossed into still lifes like an afterthought, but centered, glorified, elevated to almost mythic prominence. You walk slowly, neck craned, soaking it all in. Some are stylized and geometric, the fruit rendered in repeating spirals that draw the eye inward, hypnotically. Others are naturalistic, the pomegranate's swollen forms split open with clusters of seeds so detailed you'd swear they were painted yesterday. In one, a hand emerges from clouds offering the fruit to a kneeling figure. In another, a woman holds one aloft like a lamp, illuminating a dark cavern behind her. A third shows a row of robed figures, each holding a pomegranate, facing away from the viewer, as though offering their secrets only to the wall. You pause in front of a particularly arresting panel, a king, crown askew, cradling a pomegranate in both hands. Around him his court kneels,
their heads bowed not to him but to the fruit. A quiet voice interrupts your thoughts. Too many perfect fruits, it says, are a message. You turn to find a woman sitting beneath the mural, legs tucked beneath her, a basket of paints at her side. Her fingers are stained red and ochre. She doesn't look up from her work as she continues. They say if a mural shows more than 7 in one scene, it's not decoration, it's warning. You ask, warning of what? She finally looks at you. Balance, she says. When nature gives too much symmetry, it's a sign something else is tipping. You sit beside her, cautious not to disturb the pigments, spread out in small dishes on the ground. She dips a brush into a bowl of crimson. People used to come here when they saw a strange fruit, to paint, memorialize it. Especially the ones they were too afraid to open. She gestures to the wall behind you. That one came from the Queen's garden. You turn to see a large regal depiction of a pomegranate split vertically, revealing a perfect, symmetrical core. A tiny carving at the base marks a date nearly 2 centuries before the fall of Carthage. She kept it in a silver box, the painter murmurs. Never opened it, just let people look. Historians still argue whether this tradition of mural fruit depiction was rooted in religious devotion, elite vanity, or a form of early community record-keeping. Roman chroniclers mocked the practice, describing walls full of fruit, more prized than general. But pottery shards from the area suggest that homes displayed miniature copies of these murals indoors, possibly for protection or quiet contemplation. You ask if there are any still being painted today. She smirks. All. You watch as she adds the finishing touches to a new scene. A girl kneeling before a tree, holding a fruit in her lap, while roots tangle around her feet. That one came from a sailor's dream, she says softly. He swears the fruit spoke to him. She leans in, conspiratorial. They do that sometimes, you know. But not with words. They hum, or they remind you of something you forgot. You spend the rest of the afternoon exploring the mural lane. Each wall is a chapter, a theory, a whisper. You find a mosaic with the seeds arranged in constellation, a fresco where the juice of a fruit turns into a river, a tile where a single, bruised pomegranate lies in a basket of perfect ones. The only one that smiles. By the time the sun begins to dip, your head swims with color and metaphor. You stop at a small shop tucked at the end of the lane, where mural sketches are sold to pilgrims and passers-by. The shopkeeper offers you a rolled scroll, and when you unroll it, you find a scene of a traveler dressed eerily like you, counting seeds beneath a moonlit window. You buy it, obviously. That night, back in your room, you hang the scroll near your bed, and you count again. 6 in the bowl, 1 oath fruit, 1 hollow, 2 charms, still less than 13. Probably, you don't dream that night, but the scroll flutters slightly, even with the window closed. You wake to a knock at the door, not urgent, just polite, the kind of knock that knows it's interrupting someone mid-dream, which in your case it is. You open it, to find Amika standing there, holding a folded scrap of parchment. You're invited, she says matter-of-factly, then skips away before you can ask a single question. The invitation is simple, written in a careful looping hand. You are welcome to walk the orchard at dusk. Come quietly, come alone. At the bottom, a small symbol has been inked, a crowned pomegranate, so precise it could have been printed. You're not sure what you expected from your casual vacation in ancient Carthage, but royal orchard invitation was not on the list. Still, by late afternoon, you're winding your way toward the northeastern edge of the city, where high walls and tall trees shield the royal gardens from view. A steward in navy linen greets you silently, then gestures for you to follow. The path ahead is crushed seashell and sand, crunching faintly underfoot. Inside the orchard, the air shifts. It's cooler, quieter. You might as well have stepped through a painting. The trees here are orderly, almost unnervingly. Each pomegranate tree stands at an equal distance from its neighbor. Their trunks twist elegantly, and their fruits hang low and round, so uniform you begin to wonder if the trees have been arranged for aesthetic, spiritual, or suspiciously mathematical reason. Your guide leaves you at a fork in the path, nodding toward the left and then disappearing without a word. You follow. The orchard feels less like a garden, and more like a place that dreams itself into being every evening. The light filters through leaves in rich green gold, dappling your arms as you pass. Birds chirp faintly but fall silent as you draw closer to the heart of the grove. There, nestled in a small clearing, is the tree. It doesn't need signage, you just know this tree is older than the others. Its bark gnarled, its roots cracked into the earth like a poem written in root script, and from it hangs a single fruit, just one. You approach, slowly. The fruit is enormous, round as a melon, but still undeniably a pomegranate. Its skin is perfectly unblemished, not a single ripple, freckle or scratch. A soft voice breaks the silence. Only the queen may pick it. You turn to see an older woman seated on a low bench beside the tree. She wears a robe of deep red, embroidered with seed patterns that shimmer in the fading light. You greet her politely, instinctively lowering your head. She smiles faintly. Don't worry, I'm not a queen, just her eyes when she's busy. You sit beside her, still looking at the fruit. No one has touched it, you ask. She shakes her head. It appeared 3 seasons ago, same place, same tree, never ripens, never rots. You glance at the base of the tree, no fallen fruit, no insects, nothing but dry leaves and a circle of small stones arranged around the root. The orchard has many stories, she continues, but this fruit, it doesn't belong to any of them. She tells you of priests who've tried to bless it, farmers who tried to graft its branch, scholars who measured it for symmetry. One said it's mathematically perfect. A second said, that's impossible. A third said it might not be fruit at all. Historians still argue whether the royal orchard was a sacred site, or just a display of power and wealth. Some believe the trees were imported from across the sea and cultivated under exacting conditions. Others suggest the orchard was a kind of living calendar, mapping solstices and star paths through its layout. You ask if the queen has ever seen the fruit. She visits once a year, the woman says, walks the orchard in silence, stops here, looks, and walks away. A breeze stirs the branches. The fruit doesn't move. You lean closer. The surface of the skin is smooth, too smooth. It reflects the last of the sunlight in a way that makes you think of polished marble, or water held perfectly still, and then just faintly you hear it. Not a voice, not a song, but a tone, soft, constant, a hum, so low you wonder if it's inside your head. She hums to some, the woman says. Not all. You don't respond, you're too transfixed. There's something deeply calming about the sound, not hypnotic, not magical, just grounded, like listening to the slow breath of a giant animal asleep beneath the earth. As night begins to fall, the woman stands. You've seen what you were meant to see, she says gently. That's enough for now. You rise with her, casting one last glance at the fruit. You don't know whether it's sacred, supernatural, or some elaborate botanical fluke, but you do know you'll never forget it. Back in your room, you draw it from memory, every curve, every glint of light. Then you slip the sketch into your journal between the scroll of mural scenes and the sailor's seed superstitions, and you sleep. This time, no dreams, just
The royal orchard stays with you. You wake with that low hum still reverberating somewhere beneath your ribs, like the echo of a bell rung in a previous life. You sit for a moment in your cot, staring at your hands, half expecting a seed to roll from your palm. It doesn't, of course, but the silence in your room feels charged, expectant. Today you're chasing a rumor that feels too ridiculous to ignore, that the Romans once accused Carthaginian spies of smuggling messages inside pomegranates. Yes, spy. You'd first heard it whispered behind a pottery stall by a scholar who smelled like ink and stubbornness. He'd rolled his eyes at the idea but admitted the story appeared in a Roman satire scroll, one written by a poet named Verinius, whose primary talent appeared to be annoying every known civilization equally. You head to the scribe quarter, where you've been told surviving copies of Verinius's works are occasionally recited for a coin and a cup of wine. The streets here are calmer, lined with bookshops and clay tablet vendors. Children run errands for ink makers, while elderly scribes sit in shaded corners muttering aphorisms to themselves like aging oracles. You find the place easily enough,
a low hall with a painted sign of a scroll wrapped in grapevines and pomegranates. Subtle. Inside, a middle-aged man with a flair for the theatrical is in the middle of a reading. He waves his arms as he declaims, "Lo, the fruit-bearers of Phoenicia, whose seeds conceal more than juice. Each orb a silent envoy, each rind a helmet for trees." The audience chuckles, clearly entertained but not entirely dismissive. After the performance, you manage to corner the reader. His name is Simachos. He's a performer, but also a collector of odd histories. You ask him about the spy claim. "Oh, that old tale," he grew. Varinius was mocking Carthaginian trade caravans, said they were too organized, too perfect. He joked that if Rome cracked open their fruit, they'd find more secrets than seeds. You raise an eyebrow, but was there truth to it? Simachos leans in. "That's the problem. Carthaginians were very good at hiding things, so if someone did smuggle scrolls in fruit, we may never know, especially if they got eaten." He laughs. "You don't, because it's not just about fruit anymore, is it? It's about trust." Carthage's image to Rome was one of enigma, order, and suspicion. Their produce was exported with such precision that it unnerved the famously paranoid Romans. Historians still argue whether these spy rumors were xenophobic propaganda or real concern. One Roman general wrote that Carthaginian traders smile too often, and their baskets arrive too quickly. The implication? Something's hidden. Always. You find a copy of Varinius's poem in a back room, scrawled on treated goat hide. The part that catches your attention reads, "Let not their fruit deceive, the rind red, the smile sweet, but the tongue beneath wax, and the truth bitter." You can't help but wonder, what if, somewhere among the barrels of wine and crates of linen, one pomegranate did contain something else? A letter, a map, a coded message carved into a dried seed. You leave the scribe hall a little more paranoid than you arrived. Later at the market, you buy a pomegranate from a particularly smug merchant. He hands it to you with an infuriatingly knowing grin. You take it back to your room, sit at your table, and slice it open with reverent care. The juice flows red and thick, like always, but buried deep in the core is nothing. No scroll, no code, just seeds. And yet, you notice one seed is flat, dried, blackened slightly. You pull it free and hold it to the light. There's something etched into it. You lean closer. It's not a word, not a number. Just a dot, a single deliberate dot. Could be nothing. Could be everything. You tuck it into your pouch of charms, just in case. That night, the scroll of Varinius whispers faintly in your dreams. Not words, but rhythm. Dot, pause, dot, pause, dot. You spend the morning avoiding your table. The opened pomegranate still sits there, seeds half scooped, juice congealing into a sticky gloss. That single dark seed with its ominous dot now rests in your pouch of protective charms, nestled like an uninvited guest who's made itself very much at home. You don't want to admit it, but you're beginning to feel like the fruit is studying you now. Still, curiosity has a longer shelf life than anxiety, so you find yourself wandering into the agricultural quarter once more. Today's goal: speak with the pomegranate farmers themselves, the real ones. The soil-stained, sunburned stewards of these perplexing fruits. You find a group of them haggling over seed prices near the edge of the city, beside a low fountain that smells faintly of copper and time. They're middle-aged and older, their faces creased from sun and suspicion, but your question about fruit and the moon draws them in like a dropped coin into a deep well. One of them, a woman named Cabet, beckons you close. Her hands are stained pink to the wrist, and she wears a necklace made of dried seed husks. She speaks slowly like someone used to waiting for the soil to answer. "We never pick during a full moon," she says. "Not if the fruit's too red." You blink. "Why?" "Because it doesn't belong to us then." Another farmer grunts in agreement. Fruit that swells under full light is said to be touched, marked. The old one said it hears things the rest of us don't. You ask what happens if someone picks it anyway. "Depends," Cabet replies. "Sometimes nothing. Sometimes your dog forgets who you are, or all your eggs come out double-yolked. One time, a boy picked one and started rhyming in his sleep. Took 3 weeks to stop." She shrugs. "Moon fruit is for watching, not touching." You're fascinated. and slightly unsettling. Historians still argue whether these lunar taboos were part of Carthaginian religion, or just farmers' lore. There are fragments of moon phase calendars linked to crop cycles, and mentions of night-blessed harvests in merchant records, but there's little consensus on what exactly those terms meant. Some suggest certain fruits were set aside for temple use, others for dream rituals, and a few for disposal. You ask Corbett if she's ever kept a moon-harvested pomegranate. She smiles thinly. I have one, still in its box. Been there 5 years, hasn't changed a bit. You follow her through the winding lanes of her farmstead, until she produces a small lacquered box from beneath her sleeping mat. She opens it with ceremony. Inside, resting on a folded linen cloth, is the reddest pomegranate you've ever seen. Its color is unnervingly rich, like a drop of ink suspended mid-air. It looks wet, though it's clearly dry. The scent is faintly floral, with something sharper underneath, like cut stone or cold metal. It's never softened, she says, never cracked, still perfect. You ask why she keeps it. I want to know how long it can listen, she says. She doesn't explain, and you don't ask her to. Later, back near the market, you encounter an old beggar sitting on a bench shaped like a lion. His beard is plaited with bits of string, and he hums tunelessly as you pass. You toss him a coin and he says, without looking up, you opened it at the wrong hour. You freeze. Pardon, the moon wasn't ready, that's why your seed had a dot. You want to ask how he knows, but he's already forgotten you, staring at the sun through narrowed eyes. That night, you sit in your room and study the sky. The moon is waxing, one night short of full. You place your open fruit on the windowsill and wait. Midnight comes, the wind picks, and the fruit begins to glisten. You swear you hear something. A rustling not quite in the leaves, a hum not quite in the air. You count to 13, nothing. You whisper a word you don't know you knew, and the wind dies. The pomegranate stays still, but you don't sleep, not for a long time. The following morning dawns clear and warm, but you carry a chill with you, not on your skin, beneath it. The kind of cold that comes from waking before your dreams are finished. Like stepping out of a story mid-sentence. You dress slowly, hands lingering on your satchel. You check that the seed with the dot is still there. It is. And next to it, a faint stain on the linen that definitely wasn't there yesterday. Today, you need answers, or at least new questions, the kind that come with lunch. You've heard whispers of a tiny shrine nestled behind the old Amphora district, where pilgrims leave recipes instead of prayers. The place is dedicated to Tanat, goddess of fertility and plenty, and according to local tradition, her favorite dish, pomegranate stew. You find the shrine tucked between two collapsed pottery kilns, half swallowed by ivy and thyme. It's more an alcove than a temple, with a squat bronze bowl at its center, and a crude carving of Tanat on the wall. Triangle body, outstretched arms, 2 almond-shaped eyes that never blink. Offerings line the edges, bowls of herbs, small coins, scraps of cloth, and bundles of handwritten recipes, pinned with olive thorns. You take a seat on a stone bench worn smooth by years of waiting and wondering. A young woman arrives carrying a covered dish. She kneels, uncovers it, steam curling into the morning air, and murmurs something into the bowl. Then she sets a pomegranate half beside it, seeds glinting like garnets. She sees you watching. First fruits always go to her, she says softly. So do the old recipe. She likes the ones with vinegar and honey. You smile politely, then ask if she knows the stew you've heard of. She nods, eyes twinkling. Of course, the one that makes dreams gentle and arguments end. She offers to show you, and you follow her to a shaded stall, where her grandmother stirs a large pot over a slow-burning clay stove. The scent is like a lullaby in food form, sweet, tart, savory, with an undercurrent of spice that makes you want to exhale and never stop. The ingredients are simple enough: lentils, chopped dates, coriander, pomegranate, molasses, and a dash of dried fig skin. But there's a step you weren't expecting. The stirring must be done clockwise while whispering a name, any name, but never your own. Why not your own? You are. The grandmother smiles without teeth, because then the stew remembers you. You don't press further. Historians still argue whether Carthaginian cuisine had genuine ritual purposes, or whether the rituals developed around meals long after the fact. It's clear that food and divinity were intertwined, fruits offered to temples, honey cakes for spirits, and yes, pomegranates crushed into sauces thought to soothe prophetic frenzies. You're handed a small bowl of the finished stew and a spoon carved from bone. The first bite is startling, not for the flavor, it's delicious, but for what it evokes: warmth on your tongue. Yes, but also quiet, memory, the sensation of being watched by something gentle but enormous. You eat in silence. Across the stall, two women argue over something small: spilled wine, maybe. But as the stew is served to both, their voices soften. They share a laugh. The air shifts. You ask if the pomegranate is the magic part. The grandmother chuckles. No, it's the vinegar. The fruit is just a carrier. It makes space for the rest. Still, you suspect the fruit does more than carry. Later, you return to the shrine and write your own recipe. Not a stew but a tea. Something you'd scribbled on a napkin once, back in your own time. Chamomile, lemon peel, and yes, a few drops of pomegranate juice. You pin it to the wall with an olive thorn. Just in case, you whisper. As you turn to leave, a small bundle falls from the ledge above Tanet's carving. You catch it without thinking. It's a sachet of dried pomegranate rind, bound in thread. A gift, a joke, a sign. You tuck it into your satchel beside the seed with the dot. That night, your dreams are quiet, but you wake with the taste of stew still on your tongue, and a new thought settling into your bones. What if the fruit isn't the messenger? What if it's the door? You can't stop thinking about the number. 613, the perfect seed count, the sacred pomegranate, the number whispered in temple rites, echoed in agricultural scrolls, murmured by priests, and mocked by poets. You realize now that you've danced around it long enough. You need to understand why that number held such power, why it still clings to the edges of Carthaginian myth like a seed stuck between your teeth. So today, you go looking for the counters, not the farmers or the priests this time, but the scribes and scholars, the ones who count things not because they must but because they can't help it. Carthage has those two soft-voiced obsessives with ink-stained fingers and eyes that see patterns in everything. You make your way to a modest stone building tucked behind a row of dice. There's no sign, only a small tile above the door with the pomegranate split in two. Inside, a man sits surrounded by scrolls and baskets of fruit. You found him. His name is Sarabiel, and he has, according to rumor, counted the seeds of over 1,000 pomegranates in his lifetime. He looks up at you with mild interest, as though wondering if you too might be statistically significant. I want to understand the number, you say. He smiles. So does everyone. He gestures for you to sit and produces a fruit from a wooden tray. This one, he says, is from the northern groves. They usually run low, 400, maybe 5, but this one felt heavier. He begins slicing, reverently. You help him count. It takes longer than you expect. Each seed is delicate, and Sarabiel insists on separating them into small groups on a linen square. There are rules, he mutters. You don't count during thunder. You don't breathe wishes while touching the seeds, and never ever eat one mid-count. You nod solemnly. You wouldn't dream of it. By the time you reach the final cluster, the tension in the room is soft but thick, like waiting for a dice roll to decide your fate. 612, he whispers. You both stare at the last seed. Small, shiny, sitting alone like it knows exactly what it's about to do. He places it in your hand. You count it, he says. You do. 613. He exhales deeply with something like awe. Historians still argue about the origin of this number in Carthaginian thought. Some claim it was borrowed from neighboring cultures. Others believe it came from agricultural traditions. One theory posits that the pomegranate was seen as a divine ledger, each seed a deed, each deed a weight on the soul. 613 was the complete set, the full account. Sarabiel shows you his records, scroll after scroll marked with neat dots and symbols, a strange blend of math and mysticism. Not all 613s are the same, he says. Sometimes the seeds form a perfect circle, sometimes they align in straight rows. Once I counted one with that number where every third seed was pale. I still have it preserved, He points to a sealed jar on the shelf. Inside, dried seeds rest in careful formation like museum relics. You think it means something, you are. I think it means something, wants us to notice, he replies. He hands you another fruit. This one, he says, is rumored to sing. You slice it open. The seeds spill out, not neatly but in a clump. You begin to separate them, fingers sticky, and then faintly you hear a hum. Not a voice, not even a note, just tone. Low, persistent, like a bell rung far beneath the sea. You stop counting. Cerebile doesn't blink. Some seeds don't want to be known, he says. You leave with a new fruit tucked in your satchel, uncut and that night, back in your room, you lay it beside the others. You don't touch it. You don't even glance too long. You dream not of fruit this time, but of counting itself, of rows and lines and stars that rearrange when you blink. And when you wake there are seeds on your pillow, just 13. All identical, all facing upward.
By now, you know better than to be surprised when fruit appears where it shouldn't. Still, the 13 seeds on your pillow make you pause. They're not sticky, not warm, not even particularly fragrant. Just there, neatly arranged, perfectly spaced, like a message you haven't yet learned to read. You collect them carefully, wrapping them in a scrap of soft cloth. The satchel you carry now feels like more shrine than bag. Dotted seed, dried rind, singing seed, stew sachet, and now these 13 little mysteries. Today, you decide to retrace steps. Literally, you head toward the eastern terrace, where the city's gardens give way to open farmland and citrus groves. There, you've heard something strange happened once. A year the farmers still whisper about in private. They call it the blush harvest. The name alone gives you chills. You arrive just before midday, the sun already sharp, casting crisp shadows between the olive trees. A group of elders sits beneath a pergola strung with drying herbs, sipping cool water and murmuring in the lilting cadence of old friends, revisiting a shared ghost. You approach gently and ask about the year of the perfect fruit. Their conversation stops, but one man gestures for you to sit. He speaks first. It was a year with no frost, no wind, no thieves. Another picks up. No rot, no split skins, no birds. A third finishes. Just red. All of them, blushing like they'd been kissed by gods. You wait. They tell you about the harvest, how every pomegranate that season came out perfectly round, the skin smooth as lacquer, the seeds jewel bright and identical in size. Crates were filled, weighed, shipped. And then we stopped speaking for a while, one man says. You tilt your head. Why? He shrugs. Didn't feel right. Too much symmetry. The fruit made everything quiet. One woman adds. Our goats gave birth early. The wine never fermented. Children stopped having nightmares. And the trees didn't creak in the wind anymore. She stirs her drink with a sprig of mint and looks you dead in the eye. That's not normal. Historians still argue whether the blush harvest was real or a convenient myth layered onto a particularly good crop season. A few ancient weather logs note remarkably mild conditions that year. One tablet even refers to a fruiting harmony, though scholars disagree whether that was poetic metaphor or agricultural notation. You ask what happened to all the perfect fruit. Most were sold. Some were dried and pressed into dye. A handful were buried ceremonially in fields that hadn't yielded for years, but a few, just a few, were left untouched. The woman rises slowly and disappears into a home. She returns moments later with a long, slender box wrapped in goat hide. She opens it. Inside rests a single preserved pomegranate. It's dry but intact, its color still shockingly vivid. She touches it like it might hum or crack open if jostled. No one ever opened it, she says. Didn't feel like ours to open. You ask why she kept it. She shrugged. Felt like someone should remember. As you walk back through the fields, you notice the pomegranate trees here are spaced more widely than in the city. More freedom, less control. And yet, every few steps, you pass a tree bearing 1-2 perfect fruit. Just one. As if the memory of that harvest refuses to fully vanish. You pick up a fallen leaf. It's shaped like a teardrop,
but smells faintly of cinnamon. Back at your room, the fruit you brought from Sarabai, the one rumored to sing, has darkened slightly. The skin now bears a faint blush it didn't have before. You press your ear to it. Nothing. But later, as you fall asleep, you realize the room is quieter than it should be. No wind, no night birds, no dreams, only stillness. And somewhere outside, unseen, something blushing quietly in the dark. When the stillness becomes too loud, you do what Carthaginians always did. Turn back to movement. You need noise, laughter, resistance. And you hear whispers of exactly that on the western outskirts of the city, where the olive groves slope toward the sand dunes and the soil becomes stubborn. It's there, they say, that the great pomegranate ban once began. A strange moment in Carthaginian history, when for a brief few seasons, pomegranates were discouraged, not outlawed outright. Carthage was never that tidy with its laws, but frowned upon, shunned, politely avoided like a cousin with strange dreams and excellent memory. You arrive in a sun-bleached hamlet called Umays, where goats outnumber people and the locals wear their humor like armor. The village square is small, marked by a single gnarled tree and a crumbling fresco of Baal Hammon being offered. Ironically, a pomegranate. An elder named Mahru welcomes you with a skeptical eye and a soft laugh. "You're the one poking around the seeds," she says, like it's a known condition. "Come in then, I've got tea and stories." You follow her into a clay-walled home that smells of rosemary and old argument. She pours tea, then leans back and begins. "It started with that blush year," she says. "People were spooked. Too much perfection makes folk nervous. So the council in Carthage said, maybe ease up, maybe plant fewer trees." You nod. "Makes sense." But it wasn't just about the fruit, she continues. It was what came with them. Quiet fields, empty dreams, the feeling that someone was listening. So what did they do? They told the farmers, no new plantings, no seed counts, no rituals, just grow olives and be quiet. Naturally, this went over about as well as fermented milk in a wine jug. There was a poet. Mahru grins. Always is. His name was Kitron, a farmer's son with a tendency to write verses on fences and fruit rinds. He started posting poems in markets. Tiny rhyming protests carved into pomegranate husks and hung from trees. You ask if she remembers one. She chuckles, then recites, "Red as dawn and sweet with spite, I bloom beneath your rules at night." It spread, she said. Kids copied the lines. Merchants painted them on crates. Suddenly, not eating pomegranates became political. Historians still argue whether the ban was a formal policy or just a cultural hiccup amplified by a charismatic troublemaker. There are fragments of Senate records referencing unauthorized horticulture and fruit-related insubordination. One even complains of satirical graffiti carved into temple fruit bowls. But Mahru insists it was real. "We had a neighbor," she says, "covered his trees with sheets so no one would see them bloom. Another ground his fruit into paste before anyone could count the seeds." She shakes her head. "Silliness. But you can't ban something people already carry inside them." You ask what happened to Kitch. "Disappeared," she says. "But not before planting a grove where no grove should be." You hike out after lunch to find it, guided by a boy no older than 12, who agrees only if you give him your last candied fig. He takes you through a narrow path, then up a gentle rise behind the ridge. There, in the middle of wind-shaped stones, stands a wild cluster of pomegranate trees. They're not like the others, twisted, uneven, but bursting with fruit. The boy, "That one," he says, "is the poem tree." You approach. Someone has carved words into its bark, delicate but deliberate. "Count me not, but bite me whole. My seeds remember more than scroll." You pick one fruit, not to eat, just to hold, and somehow it feels heavier than the rest. Back at your room, the wind stirs your mural scroll. You unroll it again. The traveler counting seeds beneath the moon now seems less like a stranger, and more like reflection. You set the new fruit next to the singing one, the oath one, the hollow one. Your shelf is a gallery now, a rebellion, a quiet refusal to forget. And that night, as you drift into sleep, you hear it again, Not a hum this time, but a whisper, faint, red as dawn, and then silent.
Morning comes with a breeze, cool, citrus-tinged and curiously expectant. You rise slower now, like the story you're living in is starting to turn its final pages. The fruits on your shelf greet you like old friends, the oath-bound, the humming, the blushed, the poetic rebel, and somewhere beneath it all, the thinnest layer of dread, not fear exactly, but the quiet thrum of something nearing completion. You spend the morning wandering Carthage's residential lanes, pretending you're not being led. But you are. Your feet find the alleys between rooftops draped in linen and the shaded courtyards where lullabies drift like incense. You follow soft sounds and old smells, and end up at a familiar threshold, the house of the girl who spoke of Tanit, of smiling pomegranate. Amika answers the door with a grin and a stick of honeyed quince between her teeth. "You're late," she says. "For what?" "Fables," she replies. It's story day. Inside, her grandmother has laid out cushions beneath a fluttering shadecloth, and several children gather in a loose circle. There's a bowl of dried seeds in the middle, and as each story ends, the teller flicks one into a little clay cup. You're invited to listen, and so you do. The tales are strange, of course. This is Carthage after all, but they're warm, playful, half-truths passed down like heirlooms. One is about a boy who steals a pomegranate from a temple and finds it filled with silver coins. He becomes rich, but forgets his sister's name. Another tells of a wandering spirit who hides in seeds and must be sung to sleep each night, or she'll wake up and rearrange your furniture. And one, your favorite, is about a pomegranate who falls in love with a walnut. It rolls across the market daily just to be closer. Eventually they're cooked into the same stew. A happy ending, the children agree. After each story, the grandmother adds a seed to the cup. When you ask why, she explains softly, "So the fruit will remember." Remember what? The shape of the tale, the sound of. We feed them our voices, and in return, they don't forget us. You glance at the bowl of seeds on her shelf. Some are painted, others carved. One is wrapped in a thread of gold. "These," she says, "are bedtime guardians." You ask if she's ever heard one whisper back. She holds up a single seed, dull, blackened, like the one in your pouch. "This one told me to stay awake when I was 6. Our house caught fire that night. The roof fell where my bed had been." Historians still argue whether Carthaginian children's stories were pure fiction or thinly veiled ritual education. The line between sacred and silly was always blurry here. Some stories warn, some amuse, but all carry pomegranates like a backpack carries tools, weighty, essential, often unnoticed. You decide to tell your own story. Not everything, of course, but a piece. The singing fruit, the oath, the orchard, the ban, the mural scroll. The children listen with wide eyes, and Amika rests her chin on her knees, smiling as if she already knows the ending. When you're done, the grandmother gives you a seed to flick into the cup. You do. It lands with a soft tink, and the story is sealed. Later, you find yourself walking again, aimless but open, and you end up somehow in the market. There at the very edge sits a stall you don't remember, covered in gauze, empty but for one thing, a bowl. Inside it a single pomegranate, round and faintly glowing in the afternoon sun. No vendor, no price, just a folded scrap of parchment resting beside the fruit. You unfold it, in the same neat script as the orchard invitation. It reads, "For the end of the dream, do not cut it, let it open itself." You take it back in your room, you place it at the center of your table. You wait, and that night, the fruit does nothing. Not a hum, not a glow, but you dream, not of seeds or roots or stories. You dream of silence, a silence so deep it echoes, and in the middle of it a fruit with 1,000 eyes, watching, waiting, listening. Not dangerous, just patient. You wake gently, as if the city itself is reluctant to stir you. The room is warm, sun dappled through the lattice,
and quiet in that way that only comes when everything important has already been said. You sit up, stretch, and glance at your table. The fruit, the one that wasn't to be cut, is cracked open. Not violently, not with juice everywhere, just open, like a sigh. You approach slowly, heart thudding, as though you've come upon something mid-revelation. Inside, the seeds are arranged, yes, arranged, into a perfect spiral, not random, not just a slow curling line of glistening red, circling inward, like a labyrinth of silence. At the center, one seed, just one. It's black, not like rot, more like obsidian, a tiny polished stone, darker than shadow and somehow soft around the edges. You don't touch it, instead you sit and wait. Outside, the city hums to life. Vendors argue about fish, cloth flaps in the breeze. Somewhere a goat is having a terrible morning. But you don't move. The fruit in front of you has given its story freely. Its secrets are laid bare not in symbols or words but in stillness. You begin to understand. Carthage never feared the pomegranate because it was dangerous. They feared it because it noticed. It grew in patterns when nothing else did. It opened at its own pace. It contained more than sustenance. It carried echoes, memories, whispers. It did not ask permission. It simply was. And in that being it made people pay attention. Too much perfection in one place. That was a signal. Too many dreams that hummed in the same key. That was a message. And messages like that don't always come from gods. Sometimes they come from sea. You spend the day packing your things, carefully. Scrolls, charms, the poem tree husk, 13 seeds, wrapped in cloth, the mural sketch, the stew sachet, the black seed in its own tiny pack. As you close your satchel, you notice one final thing on your table, a faint trail of dried juice from the open fruit, curved like a smile. That night, you leave quietly. No parade, no farewell, just a whisper to the fruit bowl, and a glance over your shoulder. Carthage does not stop you. It never needed to, because once you carry its stories you're never quite the same. Wind down, and now, let's let it all soften. Let your breathing slow, like waves brushing gently against a quiet dock. Picture yourself standing once more at the edge of that old Carthaginian market. Dusk curling around the rooftops, and pomegranate seeds gleaming in the last of the sun. You feel the warmth of stone under your feet, the distant echo of a flute, the slow creak of shutters being drawn for the night. Everything is soft, and small, and safe. Somewhere nearby, a fruit splits open, not with fanfare, but with the grace of something that knows it has all the time in the world. Inside, a spiral of seeds begins to drift like stars across the table, red and slow and gentle. You watch without needing to understand. You don't question. You simply notice. A breeze lifts the corners of your journal. Your charms settle into a hush. And as the sky deepens into a sleepy indigo, you know you've come to the end of something ancient and strange. A story without sharp edges, a mystery without fear. Just a seed becoming still. So breathe a little deeper now. Unclench your hands. Let the city fade behind your closed eyes. The fruit has told its tale, and now it's your turn to rest. Sweet